I got involved with the Polgar family, the three famous Polgar sisters, in 1986. They came over to play in the New York Open Chess Championship, sponsored by Jose Cucci, who was a big chess organizer, sponsor of the New York Open, and he had given them airplane tickets to come over to be in the tournament. Now, after the New York Open, they had brought their youngest child Judith with them, and they put her in the unrated section. The reason they put her in, they didn't want anybody to know how strong Judith was. They were trying to keep it a secret that Judith was a tremendously strong player. So they put her in the unrated section of the New York Open, which of course she swept the field and won very easily, beating adults, and she won about I think a $4,000 first prize. So it became a big sensation in the New York Post. They didn't want anybody to know about it. As we record, 9-year-old girl wins $4,000 in chess tournament. So all of a sudden the cover was blown. They suddenly discovered that a 9-year-old girl is actually a master strength chess player, which nobody believed. Nobody believed it yet, that Judith Polgar was that strong. But then what happened was a guy named Shiloh Quinn, who was just a con man. He was nothing at all. He was just a con man. He contacted him and said, look, I'm going to make millions of dollars for you. The money is just waiting for you. All you have to do is come up to Montreal, and I'm going to set up with a lot of simultaneous exhibitions. You're going to have a match against Korchnoi and a whole bunch of other things that I'm going to do for you. So they had been promised to give simultaneous exhibitions out in California and other places, but they broke all those commitments and got on an airplane and went to Montreal to stay with this guy Shiloh Quinn. Shiloh Quinn wanted them to hand Zhuzha over to him, over to his custody. But of course, they were dependent on the money Zhuzha was winning for them, so they could not give Zhuzha to him. So what they finally did, they made a compromise. They decided to give 10-year-old Sophia Polgar to Shiloh Quinn. So what they did is they came back to New York, leaving a 10-year-old girl, Sophia Polgar, in the custody of Shiloh Quinn. By the way, the outcome of that is now Sophia, to this day, speaks English fluently, much better than the other two sisters, because she lived with this guy in 1986 for several months. Okay, so they come back to the JFK airport, and now instead of having 5 Polgars, there are only 4, because Sophia had been left behind. So I was there with them at the airport. Now what had happened is Jose Cucci had given the mother and the 3 daughters airplane tickets, but he had not given an airplane ticket to the father, because the father wasn't supposed to come. In fact, the father was having a hard time getting a visa. This was the first time a father had ever been able to get a visa to come to America, because they thought he was going to overstay the visa. So, but what they wanted to do was, Laszlo Polgar, the mother and the 3 children all came through Iberia Airlines, because Jose Cucci was associated with the House of Spain. So the Spanish airlines had given them, all these people, Polgars, airplane tickets. But the father didn't have one, so he had flown directly over by Malev from Budapest to JFK. Okay, so now the father wanted to see Spain. He'd never been to Spain. He wanted to see it. So what he did was he switched tickets so that instead of Zhuzha flying to Spain, that he would fly to Spain, okay? And the tickets were organized such a way that the first flight would be to Spain, and then the Malev flight would be the first flight would be Malev flight to Hungary, and Zhuzha was going to be on that flight, and then the other 3 Polgars were going to fly to Spain and have a good vacation in Spain. That was the plan. Well, what happened was the Malev flight was delayed. So now the flight to Spain was going to go first. Now the thing you have to know about the Polgar sisters is they were never allowed out of the sight of their parents. Zhuzha Polgar was never allowed out of the sight of her parents. Her mother, even when she went to the women's restroom, would go in the women's restroom with her mother. Her mother never let sight off of Zhuzha. They were so afraid that she would fall in love with some guy, and all of a sudden this guy would take over, and then they would no longer have any control over the girl. She was just on that day. This actually happened on exactly her 17th birthday. Look on the date she was born. That was her 17th birthday that this flight was going to take place. So she was just 17. So all of a sudden, because the Malev flight was delayed, the Polgars had to leave first. They had to take the flight to Iberia Airlines to Spain first, leaving Zhuzha Polgar with me, Sam Sloan. Well, of course, I'm a very honorable guy, and I would never take advantage of a young girl like that. But anyway, then the airline came along and said, well, because this flight has been delayed several hours, it'll be about 6 or 7 hours before the flight is ready to go, you can have a hotel room to stay in until the next flight is ready. So you asked me the question about, whether I ever had a chance to be with Shiloh Polgar. Well, that was my chance, but I must tell you that I flubbed it, and nothing happened. So in case this question comes up, the next time I had a similar situation was in the Copenhagen tournament in 1986, Copenhagen, Denmark, 1986. Shiloh Polgar was playing against a player relatively low rated with a rating of 22.95. And in about 15 moves, suddenly she agreed to a draw. She was on the black side of this game. And we looked around, and all of a sudden, their parents were not there. They apparently didn't realize that they didn't anticipate that she would agree to a draw so quickly. As a matter of fact, she had a bad position, and she thought she was lost. And so she was very happy when the guy offered her a draw. And she was very happy to escape. We looked around, and we discovered that we were alone. Up until then, there had never been a time, except for the previous time I just told you about, when Shiloh was alone. So what I said was, stupidly, I said, well, let's go find your parents. I didn't really realize that she had never been away from her parents. She was finally getting a chance to be alone without her parents being there. And she just, this is her big chance to do something on her own without having her mother there all the time. Remember, she's now 17 years old. She's not really a child anymore. A 17-year-old girl pretty much is free to do whatever she wants. But we went up to the room, and her father was livid, screaming. He said, "Ketu ketu haram, ketu ketu haram, ketu ketu haram, ketu ketu haram." Now, he said it over and over again, ketu ketu haram. Well, you know what that means? Well, I'll tell you what it means, because I knew some Hungarian by this time. It means 2200, 2200, 2200. The opponent was rated 22.95, and her rating, according to their calculations, was 24.45. So in other words, he was 150 points rated lower than she was, and therefore she was going to lose rating points by agreeing to a draw with this guy. So her father was enraged, livid, screaming, because she had agreed to a draw with a man 150 points rated below he was. Now remember, you have to understand, this idiot doesn't play chess. Laszlo Polgar knows nothing about chess. I mean, of course he knows the rules of chess, but he's probably, if he actually played a tournament game, he might get a 1700 rating. He certainly could not appreciate that she had basically a lost position or a very poor position against this guy. And a 22.95 player is not a beginner. He is a very strong player. He's not a grandmaster, but he's strong enough to win the game. So I just couldn't believe, and this is how I learned what the real situation is with the Polgar sisters. The family is just a nut and screaming at her because she agreed to a draw, and he knows nothing about chess to evaluate positions and understand, the political situation of this particular position that she escaped. It was a miracle that she escaped with a draw instead of losing that game.